Welcome to the Pipeline Online Podcast. In this episode, we have Pam Schwann. Pam is the president of the Saskatchewan Mining Association. There's a lot of exciting things happening in the mining space right now that are energy related. That includes the fact that we are not losing our coal industry in 4 years, and the fact that we have new uranium mines coming up, in addition to other things like potash and critical minerals. There's going to be a lot to talk about.
You're on mute, Brian.
Geez, hopefully I didn't hit that button in the first time. It's Brian Zinchuk of PipelineOnline.ca, and we have Bronwyn Eyre as my co-host. And you'll notice behind us here, I took some photos the other day out at the Poplar River Mine, and we are going to talk about mining. So we're going to bring on our guest, Pam Schwann.
Hey, Brian. Hi, Bronwyn.
Hi, Pam.
So we're going to ask Pam to introduce herself here. And what is the SMA?
Sure. I'm Pam Schwann, president of the Saskatchewan Mining Association. We are an industry funded organization that looks at advancing the interests of mining in Saskatchewan for the benefits of our member companies, the residents of the province, and we provide food and fertilizer and energy for the world. So we're looking at global citizens as well.
So there was some legislation that I noted just before we went on the air that was announced by the provincial government. Pam, you're quoted in the news release. What are we to make of this legislation? Something about stranded assets and maximizing development potential and exploration and so on. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means practically?
Sure. Well, those were amendments to the Mineral Resources Act. And what has been happening over time is that, the subsurface minerals, it's a patchwork of ownership between the Crown, private owners, including the mining companies. And sometimes it's difficulty in identifying who actually has ownership of the freehold owners, whether you go through ISC or, as you go through generations of families, sometimes titles are misplaced or lost, or there's just a lot of uncertainty. So what's happened is because the mining companies hadn't been able to get approval to mine those freehold owners because of the uncertainty of the ownership, those resources were stranded because unless you have a approval, you can't mine them. So, if you're looking at an underground mine, you have to sort of manage your mining plan and have the right sort of pillars. If you're solution mining, you need to develop your cavern. So you're not just impacting those owners that you can't find. There's other owners involved that you're also stranding their assets. So what this does is it allows for, if you can demonstrate that you've been looking for the ownership, freehold ownership, and you haven't been able to get that title, or identify that, or perhaps there's some instances where you've got really fragmented ownership and you've got, eight of the 9 owners on side, but the other doesn't. It provides a mechanism that through demonstration to the government, you're able to mine those resources. There's no change in the mineral ownership. The mineral ownership stays with who the owner is, if it can be identified, but it allows for more efficient mining operations. It allows for more efficient resource management by the Crown. And at the end of the day, there's value to everyone because the royalties go to the Crown. As you know, one of the potash royalties is based on the value of sale, regardless who owns those. So the Crown is going to receive more royalty revenue. The freehold owners will receive more royalty revenue. And then there's an increased value of sale for the potash mining companies.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember that. I remember those issues from the old days and just wonder what it means, I guess. What do you think if you had to estimate dollar figure amounts in terms of royalty generation and impact economically? Any estimate there?
Yeah, the numbers that we had are, well over $200 million a year in royalties to the Crown of additional revenue that they would receive. So it's very significant, for really what is a win-win-win. So, we see this as a really positive progress on this file.
So is this like primarily for potash then? Is it for any other areas? Like, is this, for instance, in the Esterhazy area, there might be one person that has freehold that grandpa had it, and no one can find it, the thing. If grandson discovers that, oh yeah, I guess grandpa had mineral rights, can he then cash in on the royalties, or those royalties go in trust, or what happens with them?
Yeah, basically they're held in trust. They'll go to the general revenue fund, but if the owner is identified, they and can prove their ownership, that money and the royalties would be theirs. So, it would apply to potash. It would also apply to lithium as a subsurface mineral. So, right now, sort of, it's been an issue in the potash sector, but this will be, really preventative in the growing lithium sector.
Good stuff. So, Pam, obviously your remit with the SMA is mining and exploration. What is new in your world? I mean, there's so much going on, but what are the top things that are top of mind for you these days?
Federal budget and implications would be one of them, I think. But we have a lot of activity with a lot of different commodities. I think everybody knows we provide 1/3 of the world's potash. Growing amount of the world's uranium. We're over 25%. I would think this year. We've got some new uranium mining methods that right now Orano, the picture that Brian's got up on, this one right now, that's Orano. They're using a new saber mining technique that allows for accessing uranium deposits maybe are smaller and uneconomic. This is just, they recover the ore right on from drilling from surface. So we're seeing really innovative mining methods there. The previous slide that Brian showed is, one of the uranium deposits that we have in the pipeline. This is Next Gen Energy's deposit that's just going through the federal IA process right now. We have Paladin Energy, which used to be Fission, that's advancing the nearby property as well. They won't be actually going through the IA process because their production is below the sort of the threshold limit to trigger the IAA, but they do have their provincial environmental assessment. Denison is also advancing their uranium play, which is a really interesting one because it's a new mining method, again, innovative solution mining of uranium, which produces most of the uranium in the world. In Kazakhstan, they use that method. We haven't used it in Saskatchewan before, so this will be kind of an exciting test for that. And then we've got a new copper zinc producer that's going to be in production next year at Foran's site at McIlvenna Bay, and so we can certainly go into that. And I think, as Brian wants to talk, we've got new breath in our coal sector in the southern part of the province to help us provide baseload power for our for the province and for our mining operations as a bridge to nuclear in 2050. So a lot of different activity in a lot of different regions across the province, and it's a really exciting time for the mining sector in Saskatchewan.
All right, you touched on it. I really want to get into the coal thing because up until late last year, early this year, I thought coal was dead. I thought that was it in 4 years and X number of months. As of today, it would be 4 years, 1 month, and 25 days or 24 days. Coal would be shut down. We'd be shutting down the power plants, and that would be it. And then along comes Mr. Harrison and says, "Oh, guess what? We're going to keep burning coal, and we're going to need to keep the lights on until we build nuclear." So both those have direct implications of the SMA. I actually was just talked to Jody Dukert with the United Mining Association, or United Mine Workers Association of America. I apologize. Just like half an hour ago, they are going to be in court on Monday because there's some people who want to shut down the coal decision legally.
Right.
But as it stands right now, if the Saskatchewan government prevails and the federal government, gets their fingers slapped, we get to keep doing this. That would be the Svan mine. This is near Shand, and then this is Poplar River, which I shot this summer. And the reality is that it's going to take a very long time to get reactors built. If we do go ahead with the small reactors first, 300 megawatts each, we're planning for 2 initially. Well, that's only 600 megawatts, and we have 1,500 megawatts of coal to replace, which means that if we're going to start building large reactors, which are going to need a lot more fuel, and we'll get into that side in a minute, what that means is that we're going to need coal for 20 some years until we get enough nuclear in line to actually replace the coal fleet. Never mind growth, never mind AI or anything else, or electric vehicles. So what's the SMA's take? I mean, when you first found out about this, 'cause you've been SMA president for a while, I mean, did you have any hope for coal a year ago? And what was your thoughts when they said, "Hey, guess what? It's not going away"?
Yeah, no, we were, you're right, particularly in Coronach at Poplar River. 2030 was their, the date that they were done. Estevan had a little bit longer on some areas because of the carbon capture there, and they were going to be able to run it a little bit longer. But Westmoreland's mining operation at Coronach had a pretty hard line on it at 2030. And I mean, that's hard on the morale. It's hard on the recruitment of new people. And, when you look at that whole region, not just Coronach, but Willow Bunch, and surrounding areas, while there is some, ranching and farming, there's a lot of people that work at the mine as well. And so when you take something like that out of the economy of the region, you're not just taking out the industry, you're really affecting the whole economics of the region. So that's been definitely a struggle and on everybody's mind. They still are, making sure that the lights are staying on and they've got their mine plan. But, the other piece to that is, because they thought things were done in 2030, they haven't looked at mine plans beyond that. And those aren't things that can be done overnight. There's lots of land negotiation that happens through Westmoreland and SaskPower so they can build out their mine plans. So, they're going to have to start accelerating that now. I think they're very happy to do that. But that's, just one of the practical realities is they've gone from, not a lot of optimism to, I think, a real sense of optimism right now about what that means for not just Coronach, but the whole region. And, from our company's perspective, other companies, it's an important source of baseload power, which we need. So
let's put some hard numbers on that. So this is from the Saskatchewan First, I can't remember, safety, security, something, energy plan.
Energy security, yeah.
That was released on the 20th, and you were there for that. These are the numbers that were in that plan. So combining the power plant workers and the mines from Estevan Coronach, we're looking at 1,100 people in total. From everyone I've talked to, an average salary, 100,000 is easily an average salary or more for most of the people. And you can even find that on the Sunshine List, which just got published the other day here from SaskPower. So, I mean, we're talking big wages, important, to the community and important for the economy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The average mining wage is over 2 times Saskatchewan's annual wage. So you're looking at really closer to $120,000 for the average mine worker. So significant revenue, significant part of people's economy that gets, and they're all local workers, right? So it all goes back into the local economies as well. So a lot of value add there on that salary base. And then you've got the SaskPower workers, like you've mentioned, on top of that as well. Yeah.
So you mentioned baseload power, Pam, and what this might mean for that. I mean, I know when I was in energy, the cost of power was a big concern for companies and operators in the province. Where are we at in terms of if you can contextualize what this coal decision might mean in terms of baseload power and costs going forward? Number one, and two, where things are at vis-a-vis the carbon tax on heavy emitters and so on, and what Saskatchewan's decision, means in that regard, just in terms of cost that companies are facing in the province. If you can comment on any of that.
Yeah, I can't put a definitive number, but it's multi-million-dollar question that you've asked, and it's still a lot of uncertainty. We knew the federal government was still intending on having an industrial carbon tax. That was part of the budget that came out yesterday. They actually talked about strengthening the industrial carbon tax beyond 2030, so it is a big risk for us. We have to recognize that Saskatchewan has a high carbon grid compared to other mining jurisdictions in Canada, where their grid is hydro or nuclear. Mm-hmm. And so other jurisdictions, the industrial carbon tax isn't a big deal for them, but it's a huge deal for mines operating in Saskatchewan, not just for the direct production, but we get that carbon tax put on us when we try to get our potash out to our markets, right? Because CP, KC, and CN charge our companies the carbon tax that they have to pay as well. So this is still a big question for us, and the climate strategy, competitive strategy released yesterday didn't have a lot in it other than they were going to strengthen the carbon competitiveness. They're going to keep the clean electricity regulations. None of that is really great for our sector in terms of global competitiveness. The only thing, maybe a positive takeaway, was the tone was more about working with the provinces and territories, which, as you know, wasn't really something that they did very well last time around. So the tone was good, but there's still some really big barriers that we're going to have to overcome in order to keep our global competitiveness.
Because I was going to ask you about that. I mean, obviously, in the old days, you and I talked a lot about, we talked a lot about Bill C-69. We talked a lot about the federal fuel standard, and you just referenced it. So in terms of the budget yesterday and Tuesday, I guess, and what you have heard, what you heard then and, since then, leading up to then, where are things at? And you've touched on some of that, with the federal fuel standard, for example, but global competitiveness, I mean, not a huge dent in terms of where we were and where we're at as of Tuesday.
Yeah, and there's I think a number of factors on that. On earlier this week, I was actually virtually participating in the Senate Transportation and Communication hearing on labor disruptions because, of course, the rail imports are federally regulated and have a huge impact on our ability to move our potash out and get other things in, and our global reputation as reliable, predictable trading partners. And we know that we've lost market share on our potash to Southeast Asia countries, to Belarus and Russia. So there's real impacts. There's real impacts in losing market share. There's real impacts to consequences to our mining operations continuing. If a strike lasts beyond, not just a strike, any labor disruption, lockout as well, lasts beyond a certain time frame. So there's third-party impacts that have no control over, collective bargaining agreements. So that's a concern. It's still a concern that we don't have a clear pathway on the IAA. As we want one environmental assessment that's provincial led. We're not, appreciate that Bill C-5 was a bit of a Band-Aid solution, but it doesn't fix the problem, and it's rife with picking winners and losers. And really, it should be something that's decided by the market, not by political decisions. So we think we have to fix the problem, and use maybe Bill C-5 as a bridge, the major nation building projects as a bridge, but that's not the long-term solution.
Well, Foran seemed to be one of those winners in that being announced in the first tranche of things. But as shown by the picture, which I had here a second ago, is that they're well on their way. Like this is not, by the way, this is the start of a project. I mean, no, they're that's been there for more than a day or two.
Yes. Yeah. And so it was, I think anytime you're moving something forward, you want to have some quick wins, just to get some momentum in the sales, and support for our projects in Saskatchewan is always very welcome. This one was moving forward, and it's had support from the provincial government and the federal government. This was kind of the latest push. It gave it a lot of, I think, more recognition, and it's we're going back into copper zinc production that we haven't had in Saskatchewan in 20 years. So it was a good win, but we still like the predictability of not having to play poker and see if we're going to be a winner or loser at the end of the day.
So we're just going to go to an ad here, folks, for a second. We'll be back in 30 seconds, and I'm going to get into that copper as well as uranium and everyone buying nukes these days. There's a reason that HG Jack has dominated Saskatchewan's oil patch. That's because that distinctive curved walking beam reduces energy consumption by about 25%. That means 25% less power bills, 25% less carbon tax. That's a big difference. And it's available exclusively from Grimes Sales and Service, Batman, Saskatchewan. All right, so you and I were both there at that conference in Saskatoon when they announced that plan that Minister Harrison talked about building multiple reactors. We are definitely going nuclear, but it's not just Saskatchewan. I mean, we've got Westinghouse says they have orders for 6 AP1000 reactors. They signed an MOU in Alberta with an organization that wants to build up to 4 of them there. I think it's called Energy Alberta. And Ontario is looking at building 4 reactors at Bruce C. They could be Westinghouse. They could be something else. They could be CANDUs. And then the whole world. I mean, the week after the conference, the U.S. government signed an agreement with Cameco, Westinghouse, and Brookfield. Brookfield and Cameco being the 51-49% owners of Westinghouse, for $80 billion of AP1000 reactors. Now, that's really significant for a few things. One, the most recent United States aircraft carrier, U.S. Navy aircraft carrier, is the Gerald Ford, cost $14 billion, give or take. And Trump just sent it to go spank Venezuela, so watch that on the news in the next couple of days. The price of that deal for Cameco is equal to 5.5 of those carriers, or half the American nuclear aircraft carrier fleet. That is the scale of this. It's absolutely enormous. But the other thing it does, it also says a price. Premier Moe talked about this in Estevan last week. He said that that's for 8 to 10 reactors. That means these reactors are going to cost 8 to 10 billion US each, which makes large reactors all of a sudden a lot more affordable and might even bump out small reactors. But any way you look at it, and I know that nuclear isn't so much your thing, but supplying it is, all of a sudden we're going to have a hell of a lot more customers for Saskatchewan uranium.
Good thing we're the world's second largest uranium producing region.
When do we stop being the first?
Well, we're trying to get there. We're making good progress. So yeah, no, it is a good story for Saskatchewan exploration and development and producers. It's pushing innovation. It's generating a lot of interest in the province. A lot of business opportunities, particularly for northern businesses and Indigenous-owned businesses in the province. But there's a whole supply chain, and I have to actually, I think, give a shout out to my counterpart at SIMSA, Eric Anderson, because they're doing some great work on getting the supply chain ready, the nuclear supply chain ready. Those companies are suppliers to the mining sector, and they are going to hopefully be suppliers to building nuclear reactors, small or large.
You always said in the old days, if I can call it that, Pam, that junior exploration was that exploration was the research behind mining, right? I mean, that's the work that is really it's important, and it's on really tight timelines and often limited seasons just in terms of cash flow and the rest. Where are things at in terms of junior exploration, in the province, and the some of the red tape challenges that juniors used to raise with me? Where are things at, and just where are the new developing areas in terms of junior exploration in the province?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just sort of define junior companies as a term we use for companies that don't have any revenue coming in from production. So they rely entirely on the ability to raise money in the stock markets and equity markets to fund them. They burn through cash. They do not earn any cash at all. So they're a bit of a different beast than a company like Cameco or Orano that has a revenue stream from their production. So their world is a lot different. They have limited pockets, and the money that they raise on flow-through shares can only be spent on certain things based on CRA definitions of what's an eligible exploration expense. So that provides, some bookends on what that money can be spent on. So, we spend about, our companies, I think we'll have over $400 million in exploration spend on an annual basis, primarily in northern Saskatchewan, not entirely though, but I would say you're probably looking at $250 million a year annually. 50% of that is spent on drilling. That's the biggest cost. We see a lot of northern business owners that have bought into drilling companies, like Team Drilling, for example, is owned 50 or 51% by the Athabasca Basin Development Corp. So the money from that drilling is being reinvested in the north, in those communities, and jobs in the Athabasca communities. They're just one example. There's a number of different drilling companies that are now owned in partnership with Northern Neck Dev companies. And so we see the camp expediting, things that we don't see really on the money spent in exploration right now in Saskatchewan be probably the big airborne surveys, that's coming out of Toronto or even out of Australia. And those are pretty expensive surveys. So exploration, we're trying to, it is looking for the needle in the haystack. We need areas to look for to narrow down the target area. And once you get a smaller target area, that might be after 5 or 10 years of looking and exploring, because we don't have deposits at surface. We have to use geophysics to look underneath the surface. And so it's long lead time, burns you lots of money. It's the 1 in 1,000 properties that actually finds a deposit and then goes into advancement. So I always say the exploration companies, they're people that work for them are the most optimistic people on earth, because they usually don't have success. But it's an exciting time. Some of the plays that we're looking at, uranium we've talked about, with the gold price being where it's at right now, I haven't checked it in over a week, but we're probably still over $4,000 an ounce. We've got some interesting gold plays north of Larange. Of course, we have one gold producer, been producing over 20 years now, SSR CB mine, but we've had historic production north of Larange. Those properties are, being looked at again. There's a property on the north shore of Lake Athabasca. One of the original exploration development plays in Saskatchewan was up on the Goldfields project on the north shore of Lake Athabasca, just east of Uranium City. They're looking at feasibility studies. So at that price, a lot more, becomes economic to mine. So lots of different opportunities coming our way in Saskatchewan.
So you touched on something I want to clarify, because for most of our listeners come from oil and gas, and you said something that I actually did not know in regards to the definition of a junior mineral exploration, because in oil and gas, a junior producer generally is producing oil, and they have revenue stream, and they're making money right after they drill basically their first hole. So that is an important distinction I think people need to know. And I honestly didn't know until about 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge, raising money, even when uranium prices are good or gold prices are good, because those investors, are going into tech. So you're competing against everybody that wants to invest in tech or AI to get the attention of investors. So, Canada and Saskatchewan have developed things like the flow-through exploration tax credits. And in the critical mineral strategy that Saskatchewan introduced with Minister Eyre, we've got sort of the best exploration tax credit in Canada, 30%. So as an incentive to have individuals purchase flow-through shares.
So I have a question that's related to that. I'm both on critical minerals and the flow-through shares, because I don't know if this would fall under your purview or not. But I was talking to Jim Baker, who's the new CEO of Helium Evolution. And Helium Evolution happens to share some shareholder or two of NextGen, by the way. Premier Wall is on the board for that. But anyhow, Jim told me, and Jim actually was honored at the oil show last year as a Saskatchewan legend. He said their biggest headache is they cannot get flow-through shares approved by Ottawa. They're a helium company. If they could get that, it would make a big difference. Now, I realize that's not rocks, but it's critical something or other. So, can you speak to that at all, Pam?
I can't because it's a gas, and so we're not in that space. But
All right, fair enough.
It's really a matter of I think persistent advocacy. We've had some other things that we have had to sort of keep on. Finance Canada and CRA on flow through, maybe a bit more flexibility in the definitions, and their job typically is to make sure that the finances are being responsibly used, and so you're up against a bit of a wall, but I think I would say that it's probably not a hard shut down, and just to keep trying to get helium listed as an eligible mineral.
Okay, so maybe we should go back to brass tacks here for a second. You can't swing a dead cat these days without someone talking about critical minerals. Mm-hmm. What from coming at this from a total newbie, what is a critical mineral and what are they?
Well, each country has a different list of critical minerals, so maybe we'll start there. And it can be defined as critical for different reasons, but in Canada, they're defined as critical minerals because they can be geopolitically sensitive. They're necessary for supply chains, and with the Liberal government in particular, it's been, they're necessary for the energy transition. So for Saskatchewan, we lobbied hard to have potash and uranium included on the list. They are on the list. Other minerals, and I say we lobbied hard because we are the only jurisdiction in Canada that produces potash and uranium. Other jurisdictions actually still have a moratorium on uranium exploration. They don't even allow it in the province. So we're kind of a lone voice out there advocating for uranium and potash. Other minerals, though, like copper and zinc. Copper, Brian, you mentioned, necessary for the electrification of society. And then you get into the rare earth element minerals that we haven't really talked about yet, but Saskatchewan has a really important play on, not in terms of, we do have people exploring for rare earth elements in Saskatchewan, but the work that the Saskatchewan Research Council is doing to process rare earth elements into the metals is extremely important. And it has had both provincial and federal government support, and it needs to keep having that support because China manipulates those markets, and it makes it extremely difficult for any non-government entity to get into that space.
And I noted that Tim Hodgson had talked last week, Pam, about a Canada-led critical minerals pact involving purchase agreements, price floors, stockpiling, in a coordinated bid to fight market manipulation from China. Any insight on that? I mean, is that just words at this point, or is there anything tangible behind that so far?
We haven't seen it. I think some other jurisdictions have, in terms of maybe some of the production and things like gallium, that we don't produce. But I'm hopeful that will be good news for SRC. They're down the way and can produce the metals. So hopefully, if they're talking stockpile, that's maybe an opportunity. But hopefully we will get into that space in terms of production and more exploration. But it is a very hard nut to crack, the rare earth element. Yeah.
Just to go back very briefly to the juniors, and my heart was always close to the juniors because, as you said, the eternal optimists that they are, and some of the success stories and just some of the stories generally, the walking the rocks, which we always talked about, and so on. I know there were some frustrations, let's not even call them, challenges, I guess, in the old days. I mean, given their tight time period that they have, and just the tightness of finances and everything else. I know sometimes on the provincial front, there were some challenges around unevenness on provincial environmental permitting, just the duty to consult process and so on. Has that kind of streamlined itself a little bit, Pam, if you were to say from the SMA's perspective, are things becoming a bit, harmonized on the provincial side of things in terms of what companies have to go through to get there on the junior side?
Yeah. We are still seeing challenges on the length of time that it takes permits. And when a company is using flow through share money, they have a year to use it. And so if it's taking you 160 days to get your permit, you run the risk of not being able to use that flow through share, which means that if I invested in you and I'm, as an investor, I'm not getting that benefit, don't come back to me next time.
Yeah.
So we're still facing challenges, still working through that. We'd still like to see more transparency and where things are in the process, and we think that would be helpful. So we're still working on that nut to crack. Yeah,
for sure. What about the labor market more generally? And I know that's something you wanted to touch on, and I know that was challenging a few years ago, and I'm sure it still is, just in terms of getting the right people, through whether it's Sask Poly programs or other programs, engineering and otherwise, applied engineers, the rest, into some of our key, mining areas and opportunities. What are the challenges? Where are we at with all of that?
Right. Well, we did a labor market study with the Mining Industry Human Resource Council. This is our fourth one that we've done with them. And it's, projected in the next 10 years, we're going to need another 15,000 workers, which is essentially rehiring our entire contingent of workers, sort of a mixture of the growth that we're having in the sector with new mines coming in and retirement. And so there's a number of prevalent, it was broken into prevalent careers. Those are careers that make up 50% of our workforce. And then critical careers, which are more mining specific, like your mining engineers and maybe your mechanical engineers. But, where we see a real shortage is, of course, the trades, a big one. And so we need to find new ways and innovative ways to get more people through that system. We've got a real problem in Saskatchewan in terms of a mismatch of where students are going after high school. If they're going into university, if they're going to Sask Poly or a regional college or SIIT or GDI, they're not being attracted to careers that lead into pathways to industrial industries, whether it's mining or construction or whatever. There's less than 2% of the youth today going into those fields. So we need to do collectively a better job in making those careers more attractive, talking about automation in the industry, talking about that it's a tech industry, it's not a pick and shovel industry, and making that awareness more, getting, students at a younger age more aware of the industry and more aware of rocks and minerals in general, or working with your hands in general, and also working with the teachers, because teachers to us is a sustainable way. We have our Ed Outreach program. We have one that's a long-lasting one. We've rebranded it Minerals Connected, but we like to work with teachers because they have 25-year careers and they have 30 students, and so it's a good touch for us. But just bringing in mineral resources into the classroom. And just maybe a tangible example is in grade 7 science. It's one of the units that's taught is on mixtures and solutions. Right. Well, it's a world's leading potash jurisdiction. We all know potash is soluble in water, so why not use potash as a way to talk about mixtures and solutions? So we actually have developed a free curriculum correlated resource kit. It's gone out to thousands of classrooms. Every year we send out another 200 or so. To help raise awareness about potash as a resource in the province, but how it relates to the curriculum, and just raise the awareness of students. You can bump it up in grade 10 chemistry, talking about solubility lines and things, but just getting it into the hands of students, it's a great way to do that. And so we see the future as growing our education outreach program, working in partnership with the Saskatchewan Industry Education Council, RDIEC, other groups that are interested in and have those connections to the school systems, and also we've got I think, Bronwyn, our annual GeoVenture Teachers program, where we take 20 teachers from around the province to mine sites around the province. We fly up to the uranium sites, go underground potash mines, just so they see firsthand what mining in Saskatchewan is like. And that is very impactful to them throughout their careers. So, but we need to do a better job in attracting students into the industry. And I know, Brian, your son is living that experience. And we're working with Distance Learning Center as well to try and reach more students that they are able to successfully do.
It's
I got a
wonderful.
few things I want to talk about in regards to that because, yeah, I'm definitely living that right now. It's going to go to an ad right now. Before we do, folks, we still have another 20 minutes here. You can ask questions or comments wherever you're following online. We did have one from Cliff that unfortunately wasn't related to this. So, Cliff, you got something mineral based? Ask again here if anyone else wants to. Usually we'd take the oil and gas questions, but that's not Pam's thing here. So we'll be back in a second as we look at a service rig. For your well servicing needs in southeast Saskatchewan and southwest Manitoba, you need the General. That's General Well Servicing of Cardiff, Saskatchewan. They've got a fleet of double, triple rigs, pressure vessels, and lighting rentals ready to serve you. They can perform rig assist and frac assist operations as well. Call Kevin at 306-482-3244. That's Call the General at 306-482-3244. Yes, sir. All right, so Pam did bring up my son, Spencer, who graduated this year. And he started working at SaskPower right after grad. He is currently working on utility crews, so he's doing custodial work. But as a position opens up to bid in for an apprenticeship, I had been pushing him towards electrician, but someone took him on a tour there. A senior manager took him on a tour and said, hey, I've been a millwright all my life. And now he's like, maybe I want to be a millwright. And I'm like, Good for you, son. I don't care what you do. You can do both if you want, but you're getting a trade, because if you're not getting a degree, you're getting a trade. But I've had this discussion a lot with the SaskPower people as well, because they have a similar issue with trying to attract young people. And I think what really needs to be done is that you need to get to those kids in grade 9, because the classes you choose for grade 10, if you don't choose your sciences, you're not going to be an engineer. If you do choose some of the trades, as my son did, well, then you're more likely to go into the trades. And guess what? Most trades aren't going to be replaced by AI, because it needs people to actually do physical things. So that's one of the things I've been a strong advocate of doing job shadows, and not just one. Schools will organize one, but I think what we really need to do, and I don't know how you do this at a mine, I really don't. But when it comes to SaskPower or whatnot, I've been saying, the most likely people to work for you are the sons and the daughters of the people already working for you. So make sure you strongly encourage your staff to bring your kid out for a full day to see what's like, and maybe not just to see their job, but maybe another day to see a different job, totally unrelated within the thing. Is there any possibility something like that could happen in mining?
Yeah. So take your kid to school day. A lot of our mine sites do encourage that. They live it, and they do have an exemption. If they're an underground mine, if you're under 18, you're not allowed to go by provincial regulations, but they have an exemption for that day. So, we are doing things like that. We are trying again to get back. Just yesterday, we actually had an event with Saskatchewan Industry Education Council. They run a spotlight on mining career day. We had 50 really interested students in mining from Saskatoon high schools that came out to listen. We want to get those kids onto mine sites, because really seeing is believing. Gives you a real sense, maybe you're going to love it. That's great. And maybe you're not going to love it, but at least you're going to find out, right? And find out what those jobs are like. So that's, definitely something that we're looking at doing. My understanding is Rocanville is being more active in that right now. They're kind of back out in the gate, seeing it as a way to attract the next generation of workforce. So I think, we'll need to work on that and make sure that it's a safe environment for the students that are going there, but that it gives them the, exposure, and we can do things by video, which is helpful, but it's not the same as being there.
No, it's not the same. No, for sure. I think that's a really interesting point too about grade 9, maybe even grade 7, grade 8, Brian, in terms of, because you're right. I mean, 10, 11, 12, it starts to become more specialized in terms of what you opt into. I know, and I don't know a lot about this, but I know when we did when the government put in ag in the classroom, was it? I think that's program. Actually kind of embedded right into the curriculum. And I don't know if there are similar mining programs or mining related programs that are as embedded as something like that, but I've seen it in classrooms with on the ag side. I mean, they actually get, free plants and all this kind of stuff as really as part of that unit. And I think that something that tangible would be really helpful, that it happens every time they do solutions and fluids or whatever you were saying.
Well, and like Spencer did this Ask DLC program. He was in the inaugural pilot class for the Oil and Gas 20 program. This year they'll have an Oil and Gas 30 program as well. And he actually applied at a bunch of oil field companies. He just happened to get at SAS Power. Otherwise, he would have ended up in possibly as the electrician apprentice in the oil field. But I mean, these sort of things we need to do, not just 24 students like they had in his class. We need to do 240.
Yeah, and make it very applied. I know also, that it was interesting to me when I was in energy to hear on the mining side and learn on the mining side that, in an effort to attract more women, for example, to the mining sector, that there's a lot of focus now on the technical side of things, the automated side of mine running and so on. And it's not, as you said, I think, Pam, picks and shovels. I mean, it's high tech, it's highly specialized in some cases. And so it broadens that appeal. And I think that message is important. And I know that's something you've done, like with women in mining and so on.
Yeah, we've only got about 11% of the mining workforce are females. So we're not doing, we're still underrepresented in that. We're underrepresented in terms of new Canadians. I think we're at about 8% compared to, Saskatchewan general workforce, which is a much higher rate. We are doing better than other Saskatchewan sectors in terms of Indigenous employment. But then when you break it down,
I want to talk about that because you wanted to talk about this picture, right?
Yeah.
Is that what
Yeah. So just that, I guess on the employment front, mining, especially in northern Saskatchewan, as a result of different policies and community participation and engagement and support, northern communities are probably the biggest supporters of mining because they see the direct benefits through employment. Half the workforce, are residents in northern Saskatchewan. That works out to about 47%, Indigenous employment, high paying, skilled jobs that otherwise, aren't there. But part that's often forgotten is the supply sector. And, last year when we were looking at our numbers in terms of supply chain, we have about $3 billion last year that was spent on Saskatchewan suppliers for the purchasing good, our mines purchasing goods and services. Over 900 million of that went to Indigenous owned services. So when you think about that, that's really remarkable. And it's growing every year. It, is growing by $200 million. So, and a lot of those Indigenous businesses actually started in northern Saskatchewan with the uranium mining sector, whether it's the great stories of Kitsaki, the Lac La Ronge Indian Band, or English River, or the Athabasca Basin Development Corp, Peter Ballantyne Group of Nations, and then that knowledge and that business expertise, being, sometimes the best form of flattery is copying, but, a lot of success in the Southern First Nations and Métis-owned companies as well. And so we're seeing a lot more partnerships in business between Indigenous-owned companies and the mining sector. And you see that actually now when you look at other sectors like the energy sector, when you look at SAS Power and the Crowns, those same companies keep popping up because they are really great business partners.
Well, so I had a question here regarding the announcement that Harrison had 2 weeks ago there regarding the energy plan. It just popped into my mind here because he was talking about connecting the northern grid to the southern grid and eventually making a loop so we have not just on the eastern side, but also the western side, connecting a lot of those communities that you're talking about who are supplying a lot of mining things. If we do that, if we actually spend $700 million and finally have one grid for all of Saskatchewan, including the northern stuff, what implications does that have on the mining sector as companies mining, but also on the people who are being the workforce for your sector? What would that do?
Well, I think it'd be extremely helpful. Right now, the mining grid up north is all hydro, and it's really coming from Sandy Bay. So the mines up at, west of Wollaston, the MacArthur River, Key Lake, Cigar Lake, McLean Lake, all that power supply is coming from 500 kilometers to the east. And so you've got transmission issues with the amount of power that's being distributed. Then if you have things like lightning strikes, which happen all the time, your power goes down. Fires, your power goes down. And so you have to have backup power, which are diesel generators. So there's another cost, more carbon emissions, and it's just not reliable. So by having that interconnection with the north and south grid, it's going to improve the reliability and cost for northern mines. And, we noted that we've got new mines coming on, Foran's coming on with copper, zinc. They've got a new power line that's going to come off of Sandy Bay power grid. But, on the west side, we've got a real power deficiency right now where, NextGen and Paladin are going to be having their mines. And so that will certainly help them. But, you're going to need more power in the north to supply the industries up there, whether it's mining or forestry, or, maybe even AI in northern Saskatchewan. Who knows, right?
Yeah. Remind me, on this north-south power announcement, was it more aspirational or was it more tangible?
I believe they've set aside the money, and I can't remember if it was 700 million or 900 million, but it's going to happen. Yeah. So, or it's part of the plan. I guess, everything is going to hinges a little bit on the industrial carbon price and the clean electricity regulations to some extent. But I think the plan is that they are going to be connected.
Do you find it frustrating sometimes, Pam, that those things get a little bit lost in the mix? I mean, federal fuel standard, for example, and other things. Or is there as much focus on all of that as there should be? Or is it that people kind of collate some of these policies and they're not maybe aware specifically of the impacts? And I guess how can one go about changing that?
Yes, they're not aware because, as an individual, you might not see as much of a increase in price, but it does affect everybody's affordability as an individual voter or as a company that's, when it's one of your top three costs, you're going to really notice what the cost is. So, by being on shows like this, that gives us an opportunity to maybe talk about what some of the issues are. We have a publication that we identify some of these issues at, and just trying to, do our own advocacy with provincial government, federal governments, and trying to get them understand about, Saskatchewan's power system is unique to all of Canada.
Yeah.
And, if they want us to be providing potash to the world, like you heard every federal minister say when Russia invaded Ukraine, then you have to give us the tools to make sure we can be globally competitive.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm saying this, you're not saying this, I'm saying this. I sometimes think, and it's not an SMA thing so much as a company specific thing. And I think that energy companies missed a lot of chances and have missed a lot of chances over the years to be a bit more outspoken about, you don't have to be incredibly harsh. You just have to diplomatically point out the impact of some of these policies and regulations on your company and the sector. And I think similarly with some mining companies and some uranium companies, nuclear, I think would be helpful to sometimes say, thanks for this and thanks for that and thanks for the maybe renewed diplomacy, but we still have a lot of challenges in Saskatchewan if we're going to get to, use the emissions argument, right? If we're going to help the world in this regard, or help the country, or help our footprint, you're going to have to work with us. And I continue to find that very frustrating. Governments can't do everything. Your types of organizations can't do everything in terms of this. It has to also be sometimes. Private companies are highlighted a lot, and I'm thinking of one in particular, which gets a lot of airtime. And I think it would be helpful to occasionally point out just the nuts and bolts and the effects of some of these policies on competitiveness, for example. Just me saying, not you.
There's one thing I wanted to talk about here is before we go. We do have to wrap up pretty quick. Is that, I think that some people see the mining sector totally separate from the energy sector, like for oil and gas. But in reality, I think there's a lot more that I think we need to work closer together on a lot of these things. For example, on the electrical side, this was discussed in committee between the NDP opposition critic, Alina Young, and Jeremy Harrison, about building the Aspen power station near Lanigan. Now, it didn't land there by magic. It's 20 miles from the Jansen power mine. And the question was, what is the load demand going to be for BHP Jansen when it eventually gets to full build out? And the answer was 300 megawatts, which is basically that entire power station of 370. So, which means natural gas is going to have to supply it. So here we have the energy sector, natural gas, supplying the power to make the minerals. And if we don't have all the above, you're not feeding anyone because you're not getting any potash out of the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is more and more overlap between what's the mineral sector and what's the energy sector. I mean, whether it's uranium or lithium, or copper and electrification, they all are sources of energy that we all kind of need. And so, we are definitely happy to work with others and advocating things. We have, we are allergic to oil and gas in some areas. It's a risk to our potash sector, and you don't want to be poking holes into the potash area and flooding out a mine.
Sorry, did you say Rocanville? It sounded like you said Rocanville there.
Yeah. But there's other places certainly where we've got a lot of common interests, and labor workforce is absolutely one of them, and making sure we have enough of the fundamental power in the province to power our industries, but also get our products to port. So whether that's oil, whether that's potash, whether that's getting uranium exported more efficiently, there are a lot of commonalities to work on, and we're kind of fortunate in Saskatchewan that it's we've got so many richness opportunities that there are a lot of opportunities to work together.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I think Brian's right. I mean, this idea of blending more in terms of where there are commonalities, I think is a really good point. I mean, and after all, I mean, let's not forget what world leaders we are in these areas. It's phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal. Sort of we're in the eye of won't call it storm, but certainly in the eye of things. So incredible story to tell. Thank you so much for doing this today, Pam.
No, appreciate it. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up at that here, folks. So thank you very much for coming on, Pam. I can't go many places where I don't see Pam these days. A lot of conferences and government stuff. And I mean, you're absolutely the voice of the industry there, and it's good to be able to hear those sort of things because, as Brahman alluded to earlier, I think oil and gas really screwed up when it came to letting the people try to eliminate our industry. And I think we need people to be screaming from the rooftops from all the above. So with that, folks, thank you very much. And we'll see you again, hopefully in about 2 weeks, probably usually on our Mondays. So get you then.
Thank you.